Let me show you how to keep the dice rolling when you're doing that thing over there, homie. Hey, let's go! Cause I'm feeling like I'm running and I'm feeling like I gotta get away. Better know that I don't and I won't ever stop. Cause you know I gotta win every day. See, you really wanna pop me. Just know that you will never flop me. And I know that I gotta be a little cocky. You ain't never gonna stop me. Every time I come a nigga gotta set it, then I gotta go and then I gotta get it, then I gotta blow and then I gotta shut it. Any little thing a nigga think that he be doing, cause it doesn't matter, cause I'm gonna dead it. Then I'm gonna murder everything and anything about it. Boom, about a thing. I gotta do a lot of things to make it clearer to a couple niggas that I always win and then I gotta get it again and again and again. And I be doing it to death and now I move a little foul. Nigga better call a rap and everybody know my style. Niggas know that I'm the best when it comes to doing this. And I be banging on my chest and I bang in the east and I banging in the west. And I can't give you more and I will never give you less. You will hear it in the street and you can read it in the press. Do you really wanna know what's next? Let's go. See the way we on it and we all up in the race. And you know we gotta go now try to keep up with the pace. And we struggling and hustling and set it and get it. And we always gotta do it, take it to another place. Gotta taste it and I gotta grab it. And I gotta cut all through this traffic just to be at the top of the throne. But I know I gotta have it.
How's it going, guys, and welcome back to another build video, this one on my double Trouble Flynt build. A MNTIS clone build focused on using clone for actually utility over just massive damage output, to have Zane himself being the main damage dealer but still getting as many benefits as he can out of clone. Namely, clone can draw aggro away from Zane, allows for teleportation for some incredibly fun movement, and debuffing through fractal frags. But there is a little extra here and there, so let's just get on into things here. So starting out with our action stones, as I mentioned, this is a MNTIS clone build, so of course we are using MNTIS Cannon and clone. Our first augment is No Way Out, which we are using mostly for the damage increase, as that 25% damage bonus is almost entirely multiplicative, and is an incredibly nice damage bonus for anything hit by MNTIS, which does stack very nicely with the Piss Grenade, which we are using very heavily in this build, but a little more on that in just a minute. Our second augment is Proliferation, just to get an additional 2 charges, along with a little bit more MNTIS damage, but it's mostly just for those charges. The important augment for clone is Doppelbanger, as this is what allows us to very easily move clone between areas rather than having to teleport all the way back to him. But I also like to run Schadenfreude, as this is just a bit of extra survivability. Whenever the clone takes damage, Zane's shield is restored by a portion of that damage. This will keep your shields up pretty damn well, especially since clone does tend to draw aggro pretty well already, which is why I don't really run which one's real, because it kind of just feels overkill in a majority of situations, and I think the survivability from Schadenfreude is just a lot better. Digital distribution I think is more bad than it is good. While again it is sort of more survivability for Zane, it does make clone die very quickly, which is a bit of an issue since we don't have boom enhance, so I just really wouldn't recommend using this one. And binary system isn't terrible. It can be good for I guess a bit more Harmageddon, but we're already going to be dealing cryo damage as is, and this augment also just overall isn't that great. The damage is really low, and I kind of just wish it was an instant freeze rather than just dealing cryo damage, so I just think Schadenfreude ends up being the best utility that we can pick up here. Now let's start off with Orange Tree since we're here, and this is our most interesting tree. There are many differences here between a normal Orange Tree setup, namely we aren't getting double barrel and we aren't getting boom enhance as mentioned previously, and that's just simply because, again, we don't care about clone doing damage. That's not the point of him here. Investing this many points into Orange Tree takes away from Zane's ability himself. We don't want that, we just want clone for utility, so boom enhance and double barrel just aren't really worthwhile. Boom enhance could be, again, because it does have that max health, it makes clone live forever, but we have a trick to fix that anyways. Now we also pick up fractal frags, which is not usual for a lot of clone damage builds because clone throws out grenades a lot, as this has a kill steal component where every time that Zane kills an enemy, it gives clone a 42% chance to throw a grenade. With the amount of shit that you kill in the endgame of BL3, clone will throw grenades more than he will shoot, which normally is terrible, but in this case it is absolutely amazing because grenades are a fantastic source of utility, with the main one that we run being an It's Piss Grenade, providing a debuff and making any enemies hit by it take increased damage. But there are a couple other options with that we will talk about in the gear section. But the rest of this tree is pretty standard, 3 points per Immunitas just for some mag size, points into borrowed time to keep clone up longer. You could max this out with 5 by taking 1 point out of Donnybrook, which honestly I probably would recommend. I do tend to just like having that extra health regen, but it is definitely better just to have the action store duration. 1 point ductate mod just to avoid our own splash damage, which is very nice with No Way Out, as you will be yoinking enemies towards yourself. Quick breather, so that each time you teleport, we heal clone back up. This is part of what keeps him alive even without boom enhance, so you do definitely want to be making use of this, and of course teleporting with clone. And Old U, which is mostly luxury, but is an incredibly strong skill. It is fantastic utility, especially for Zane, because he has an absolute absolutely atrocious fight for your life, but I wouldn't really say it's absolutely necessary anywhere other than during maybe Guardian Takedown. Zane's fight for your life is shit, but if you're able to make good use of his ability to stay out of it, you could instead put this point into Supersonic Man for more move speed and therefore more damage. Now with both Supersonic Man and Borrowed Time, these actually function incredibly favorably with Zane's Mantis cannon, and especially with Proliferation, as with each charge of Mantis consumed, these will stack again. It is considered active pretty much when you use a Mantis charge and it is on cooldown. So you can stack a shit ton of action skill duration and a shit ton of movement speed alongside Mantis. As you can see down in my hotbar below, we have Borrowed Time and Supersonic Man both active. Each time I get a charge of my Mantis cannon back, it goes back off, but as long as all of them are on cooldown, currently I only have a ×4, but that can go up to a ×5 if you use all of them while they're at max. And listen, even though we aren't going boom enhance and double barrel, Clone is still crazy good at Mayhem 11, even without full orange investment. Even into True Molly 1 Takedown, he will be solo killing shit. So even though he's not a focus here and he is not doing a lot of damage, he is dealing some pretty decent supportive damage. Now coming over to our blue tree, this is of course an incredibly standard tree. 5 out of 5 Violent Momentum, of course, Violent Speed, 1 out of 5 Salvation, as this is all you really need. 3% lifesteal during the endgame is absolutely more than necessary. As long as you are firing, you will be healing up your health bar, especially with Clone also dealing damage. Even when you're in a reload, oftentimes you'll still be healing. So Salvation, of course, always incredibly strong. 5 points into Cool Hand for more reload speed. Currently have 4 into Violent Violence for some extra fire rate, and 3 points into Plain Dirty, which really I wouldn't ever recommend going above 3 points, because as I always have to mention with Plain Dirty, because Gearbox has to make my life pain, the skill description does not reflect what this actually does. As written, it says after killing an enemy, Zane's next 5 shots all have a chance to fire an additional projectile. What this actually means is that this kill skill has that % chance to activate. When that kill skill gets activated, Zane's next 5 shots are guaranteed to have an extra projectile. So between the amount of shit that you're killing and the amount of charges of Mantis that you're spamming out, 3 points is more than enough to pretty much always have this activated. The amount of points you'll actually put into here actually ends up depending on your class mod roll. As for example, my current Executor has 3 points into it, so I could just completely take the points out of this if I wanted to. But the way I tend to see it is having a total of 3 is ideal, with a total of 4 being the amount that I would say is the absolute maximum that you'd want. And then just 1 point Good Misfortune to help keep our action stills up, and then of course you pick up Death Follows Close. Now if you wanted to take some points out of Violent Violence or Cool Hand, generally though I think Cold Bore is actually just overkill in a majority of situations for Zane, and in the situations where it isn't overkill, it kind of just ends up not doing too much. So I usually just avoid it and instead opt for the reload speed and fire rate. The exception with this is Cool Hand can be worth it if you're using weapons that are high damage but slower fire rate, like the Moonfire, Jacob Snipers, again any sort of high damage precision weapon that you're using in a mobbing situation, then in that case Cold Bore can be useful. And our purple tree, once again an incredibly generic spec. 5 out of 5 Mana Focus, because this gives us stupid amounts of accuracy and handling, and will make any gun that we use fire fucking laser beams of bullets. 5 out of 5 Headsman's Hand for that critical hit damage, because of course Zane is absolutely broken with multiplicative damage bonuses on top of that 500-ish% gun damage that he often runs around with. 5 points into Commitment for a little bit of extra gun damage, which really isn't necessary, but that cooldown rate is incredibly nice because again we want to be spamming Mantis as much as possible. Fugitive, kind of just a nice little quality of life thing, does end up giving us more damage since we can sprint, therefore move faster while shooting and then dealing more damage because of Violent Momentum. Domino Effect for some more reload speed and fire rate. 3 points into Erasure, 1 point Sheer Will just to move further down and also get a little bit of extra cooldown rate. And then of course our capstone, Our Man Flint, a nice little multiplicative damage bonus. Our Man Flint is also very important since we aren't going anywhere into Green Tree to get Brain Freeze. This will help us freeze enemies by ADSing with cryo damage. And that is about it for our skill trees as we don't put anything into green. Now for our weapons, of course, you can kind of just use anything that's generally good on Zane. Light Shows, Smogs, Chaos, the Moonfire, the Free Radical, of course. Multi-Tap is an incredible weapon, the Chaosin, the Redistributor, the Torrent. I'll just scroll on through here if you guys want more gun ideas. But Zane is able to use a lot of things, and this build is absolutely no exception, as again, it is a Zane focus. Now generally, the anointment you want to go for is some sort of ASE. If it's a gun that is not currently dealing cryo damage, I go for ASE cryo damage on it. But if it is a gun doing cryo damage, I go for ASE radiation, as cryo radiation is just an incredibly good damage combo and provides coverage for pretty much every health bar. But since we are using Clone, and if you want to use a weapon that usually is just a little bit too ammo hungry, you can run the while Digi-Clone is active, regenerate 30% of magazine ammo per second. While this can be a pretty pretty big hit to your damage output because damage from Anointments is pretty big to Zane, this is definitely still an incredibly good option and does make some things like the Tizzy more viable. Now, of course, we do also have access to the ASE splash damage increased anointment, which I do usually carry around on all of my launchers. However, you can also just put it on any weapon that is dealing splash damage, and it will generally be more damage than just an elemental ASE anointment. You're just sacrificing a bit of potential to your elemental coverage, which is why I tend to run it on my heavies because I'm gonna usually be matching element with those anyways. Now, of course, for shield, as every fucking build since this thing's release does, we are running the Revolter, which of course has the Ashbreak anointment on it, so that with Mantis we can have this always active. If you don't feel like using the Revolter, the Old God or the Frozen Snowshoe is an incredibly good alternative. But this isn't the only shield I carry around on me, as I do also have an Infernal Wish with ASE Elemental on it. Carrying around one of these with each element on its anointment is definitely ideal, as usually this is what I'll swap to for bossing as long as the boss doesn't have a massive shield health bar, because this will be better overall damage than the Revolter against a single damage type. But I also carry around a Plus Ultra, and this is our little trick to keep Clone alive. What you can do before an engagement, because Clone does get a copy of your shield, is have the Plus Ultra, pop out Clone, he has a copy of the Plus Ultra on him, meaning that his health pool is now doubled, because that is a hidden effect of the Plus Ultra. As you can see, I currently have 90,000 base health. When I swap back to my Revolter, that goes down to 45k. But Clone gets to keep that health effect even when I'm not currently wearing the Revolter, because he gets a copy of my shield when he is summoned. So using that, we can keep him alive for much longer without having to worry about constantly teleporting to him pretty much whenever it's off cooldown in super heavy mobbing sections. Swapping to the Plus Ultra really isn't necessary if it's something you don't want to do, but it does help the gameplay a hell of a lot. For our grenade, we use an It's Piss, ideally a very low level It's Piss, so that Clone has less potential to kill himself with it. I'm not going to get into it here, but there are very easy ways of obtaining a level 1 Mayhem 10 anointed variant of pretty much any weapon you need, and there are tons of videos elsewhere going over that. But of course, we do this for that 20% increased damage debuff on any enemies hit by this, as Clone will be spamming these out, and pretty much everything is gonna be drenched in piss. And trust me, Clone pisses on shit extremely effectively. I actually really didn't think this would be all that noticeable, and I kind of thought I'd end up using something else, but it is, especially with stacking that No Way Out debuff. This build does end up dealing a significant amount of damage to enemies. Now for our anointment here, on grenade throw is actually slightly higher overall damage than ASE Elemental, but it's really not by much. They're pretty much interchangeable, with ASE tending to just be more consistent along with being able to provide more elemental coverage, which is why it tends to be my preferred. But we do have other options for our grenades here, with the Mesmer allowing us to possess enemies to fight for us, which of course will draw aggro. Clone does this pretty effectively though a lot of the time as is, so this isn't super necessary, and if you are going to use it, again, I highly recommend getting a low level one, otherwise Clone will probably down himself with it. But we also have the recurring Hex in either Radiation or Cryo, as both of these can also be incredibly helpful, with the Cryo variant helping us freeze enemies more often to make even better use of our Icebreaker relic, or the Radiation just applying radiation very effectively to a lot of enemies to get those big radiation chains. And since these chain to enemies, you don't really have to worry about them killing Clone, so you can use max level variants if you would prefer him to still do a little bit more damage with the nades that he's tossing out. For our class mod, as I mentioned, we are using the Executor. These skill rolls honestly don't really matter all that much with your Executor. It is mostly about those passives where you do definitely want weapon crit, splash damage, or weapon type damage as your big main damage dealers, with mag size also being a very nice roll. And then for bossing, I do carry around an Infiltrator with +5 into Violent Momentum, as this is incredibly good for dealing with enemies where you can't easily access their crit spot. Of course, the Executor is giving us a shit ton of crit damage and cryo damage, but that crit damage doesn't really matter if you can't hit the crit. If you're able to hit the boss's crit, then the Executor does actually deal more damage than a 5 out of 5 Violent Momentum Infiltrator, but on something like Hemovorus, where it's incredibly difficult to hit its crit, the Infiltrator is better to swap over to. And finally here we have our relic where I run an Icebreaker Victory Rush, ideally with cryo damage, AoE damage, and mag size, with movement speed also being a solid option. Of course, this has always been an incredibly good relic for Zane, with the Victory Rush providing V1 damage and the Icebreaker providing V2, both of which are damage types that Zane either has no or very limited access to, and therefore are almost entirely multiplicative damage bonuses. But again, it doesn't really do too much for us for bossing, which is where the Toboggan comes in, allowing us to slide, getting a shit ton ton of movement speed, building up amp damage on our shot, and able to blow the head off of whatever we point our gun at. Ideally here you get heavy weapon damage, AoE damage, and movement speed. That's gonna about do it for this one though. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, definitely consider leaving a like, comment, subscribe, all of that. I'll be live right after this video goes up, right here on YouTube and also over on my Twitch channel, where there will be a link to down in the description below, and just under that is a link to my Discord server where you can come and join and hang out. But with that all being said, I hope to see you guys in the next one.